like to officially welcome you to the Ontario Trillium Foundation's Diving Deeper webinar series, Attracting and Sustaining Your Business within the collective impact work that you're doing. The Ontario Trillium Foundation has contracted the Tamarack Institute to help build the collective impact capacity both within the Ontario Trillium Foundation grantees and also within the community. I am very pleased to welcome Tracy Robertson from the Ontario Trillium Foundation onto this call, and she's going to give you a little bit more information as to the Trillium Foundation's collective impact work. Over to you, Tracy.
Thanks, Heather. Appreciate that introduction. As Heather mentioned, I'm Tracy Robertson, and I'm with the Ontario Trillium Foundation. I'm the strategy lead for Prosperous People. Welcome, everyone, to the webinar. Really excited that you're all here. For the people who don't know Trillium Foundation, our mission is to build healthy and vibrant communities throughout Ontario. And we do this by strengthening the capacity of the voluntary sector through investments in our community-based initiatives. We are Canada's largest grant-making foundation, and we award $110 million each year into about 1,000 initiatives, organizations that we invest in every year. And we know that over the next decade we will be investing about $1 billion into the communities of Ontario. And because of this, we know that there's of course a real interest in looking at our strategy and creating an impactful strategy, which we will share one piece of it shortly. We wanted to do just a quick poll too at this point to see how many grantees are on the call. And Heather is going to be doing that as we show up on your screen. And we'll probably have the answer fairly shortly.
It's almost split. So we have 43% who are grantees and 58 who are no. So it's about even. It's about even.
Okay, that's great. We're glad to have many of you on the call, and glad to have many of you who may not know about our work. So we wanted to dive a little bit deeply into, for this webinar, of course, our collective impact granting stream, which is an exciting part of our funding, our investment strategy. We have identified a collective impact stream because we recognize that there are the complex issues that we have out there, and we wanted to identify a stream and investment strategy that would bring fundamental change to collective action that we want to support. We know that they're in this stream, for example, we know in addressing complex social issues in communities, that we know that often they're not easy to resolve. And so although we have several grants, we have other initiatives for others who don't know on our website to address some of the programmatic and programs that we want to support in the province. But this one is one that we work together with you on. We look at working in partnership in supporting change within our communities and having more transformational change as we see it. So there's 3 different stages that are a part of our collective impact stream. And you'll see them on the screen. One is defining the impact, and the other is organizing for impact, and then delivering for impact. And every single stream or stage here has an investment strategy to it, and an opportunity for us to support each kind of phase of the collective impact process. So let me just briefly go through the 3 different phases. The stage 1 is define the impact, and in this stage we have organizations we know work together to articulate and define their urgent complex issue. They aim to address and start develop also a theory of change in this phase. It might be a time where you're convening cross-sectoral stakeholders, ensuring that people who are affected by the collective impact are involved in the process and are actively participating, and you're really identifying who else needs to be at the table. We're looking at kind of a cross-disciplinary kind of approach to collective impact, but we also know it might take some time to even convene those folks. So we have funding up to $30,000. The term is up to 18 months. It can be within 3 months to 18 months. It doesn't matter. You choose it in terms of how much time it will take you in terms to build and almost building that evidence and defining a leadership committee to really move forward. In the second phase, or stage, we have organizations at this point where we have funding up to $75,000 per year, up to 2 years. But this is where you're confirming almost that common agenda, so you've got that diversity of stakeholders around the table. You've got that issue that you're going to address that's very specific and targeted, and you would be developing a governance model, backbone structure, and you start building at this stage a shared measurement system and evaluation plan, and determine how kind of those communications, internal and external, will be managed. In the stage 1 and stage 2 that I just shared, that is typically where we see our collective impact initiatives coming in, where we're kind of working together with them at that point. But both of those stages would then lead to the third stage, which is really the delivering impact stage. And this one focuses on, you've got the theory of change, you're now looking at implementing that collective work, you've got understanding that the collective impact work is now being integrated over, we have up to 5 years that we look at investing in, recognizing that collective impact work and systemic change takes a long time. We have at up to $500,000 per year for the 5-year, at least the 5-year phase of that. And this is a recognition, of course, through this process and through this approach, that it's very adaptive and iterative in nature, even in your monitoring and your implementing, and even the lessons learned that you'd have along the way, and how you have to adapt plans. But again, we would be working in partnership with you in partnering with a number of different folks as a part of this. So those are the 3 phases, and we have, these are kind of some ideas in terms of, not ideas, these are the different collective impact initiatives we actually are investing in at this point. Doesn't mean that we wouldn't look at a variety of different others, but you'll see that we do have a mix, and quite excited about the different phases that these are in. My majority of them are in the first stage, even defining what that impact will be, and they all will be aligned with one of our action areas within our strategy, which is all on our website. So you'll see also some descriptors of these as well. And so where you would get this information is our website itself, where we've got a number of different programs as well on the site, where we've got lots of information regarding collective impact and others. But you can also contact our support center that's there, that will then link you to people such as myself or program staff, etc., who you would like to speak with to discuss the initiative. And just in addition to the information that's on our website, as well as contacting us and having conversations with us along the way, where we work with you on the Collective Impact Initiative, we also partner with Tamarack with a number of things. We are investing in a toolkit that will be available at the beginning of next year, that will be open and on our website and available to you to use. And we also contract Tamarack to get coaching, so this coaching may happen at the beginning of a collective impact or along the way. We have workshops that we also contract Tamarack for, so you can be a part of that as well. And then, of course, we have webinars, which is what we have right now, where we're delving deeper into meaningful engagement of the business partner. So I'm going to, at that point, move it on, give it to Heather, back to Heather, and we can move on with today's webinar.
Thank you very much, Tracy. So today's webinar, we are hoping to provide, well, not hoping, but we will provide a collective impact example from New Brunswick, where business leaders are fully engaged. And further, we're going to also talk about the common challenges that one experiences, and how to meaningfully engage the business leaders in your effort. Following the presentation, we will have questions and answers, and we invite you to pose your questions at any time during the presentation. I will be fielding the questions and we'll be responding them to the end. So I would like to welcome Monica Chaplin and Gary Lawson. Monica's life passion is learning the ways and means to improve the social foundations that cause communities to thrive. She believes communities are the engines of the healthy society and that strong communities are those that take ownership of their preferred future, build diverse leaderships to solve big problems, and unleash the talents of all residents to improve quality of life. Monica's community is St. John, New Brunswick, and for the past 16 years, her employer has been the Business Community Anti-Poverty Initiative, the organization of business leaders who work in collaboration with others to end generational poverty in St. John. Welcome, Monica. Gary is a partner with the law firm Lawson Creamer and practices primarily business law and estate planning in St. John, New Brunswick. Throughout his 35 years of practice, Gary has always tried to contribute some of his time and talent to the community in a variety of ways and to a variety of organizations. Gary became involved in the PCAPI from the beginning in 1997 and has served as, among other roles, co-chair of the leadership group and remains a member of the leadership group. Gary also currently serves as director for the St. John Area Hospice Organization. I'm going to be transferring the presentation over to Monica, and it's going to take just a few seconds for it to go over to her screen. So I'm going to pass it over to you two, and you guys can kind of talk, and we can see your screen now.
All right, well, welcome everybody. Glad you're able to join us. Monica and I are here together. We'll hopefully take you through something that will be informative, and the extent that it's informative, Monica is responsible for it. The rest of it I can take credit for. I'm not used to speaking to a faceless and voiceless crowd, so I'm used to getting a little energy from the crowd. So I apologize if it doesn't come off as energized, and if it doesn't, then I hope you enjoy your nap. Monica will be interesting. Please wake up intermittently for her part. So BCAPI, Be Cathy as we call it locally, the Business Community Anti-Poverty Initiative. One thing we did not do was spend any money on coming up with a moniker that was really going to be catchy, but it at least is a true descriptor of what it is that the organization's purpose is, and that is to fight poverty and the business leaders of the community assisting in fighting poverty. St. John, you've got a picture on your screen of St. John. I would point out that while we are a port city, we don't really have a big fishing fleet, but Monica chose this picture because it shows some of the charming buildings our beautiful city has to offer. We have been historically an industrial city, although that is changing. There's still certainly industry here, but that, like many communities, is changing. The population of St. John, the greater St. John area, is about 130,000. The city itself is only about 70,000. And generally speaking, the poverty that we're addressing is focused on the city itself, within the city limits itself. One would just say the community is collectively a pretty generous community. We're pretty good at getting together and addressing issues that need to be addressed. And I will tell you, and I mentioned it a little later, but this Be Cathy initiative started in 1997, and I attended the first meeting, and being perhaps a little naive, maybe that's a generous term, thought, well, you know, the business community will turn their mind to this issue of poverty, and it will be we'll have many of the issues addressed very quickly. And of course, here we are almost literally to the day 19 years later, and we're still battling the cause. Anyway, Monica is going to take us through a little bit more information on Be Cathy.
Thanks, Gary. Because the backdrop of this webinar is collective impact, we thought after introducing our city that we would just show you the slide that highlights our collective impact initiative in St. John, particularly that the business community is involved in. And as Gary said, it's to end generational poverty. And we have 4 priorities within our collective impact work. At the center are low-income neighborhoods. They surround our inner city core, and there's 5 of them. And our work here is to actually revitalize these neighborhoods, which currently have high concentrations of poverty. Supporting that neighborhood revitalization work are 3 other pillars: employment, health, and education. We want to be able to connect people to the workforce who are not currently involved, and we want to create the new models of healthcare through introduce community health centers, a neighborhood approach. And the 3rd pillar is of course education. This is the pillar where education, the business community has been most involved in over time. We have for each of these pillars we have ambitious targets, and for the education target, by 2020 we want 90% of our high school students graduating from high school. And to give you an idea of the gap that we're trying to close, when we initially measured high school completion rates, the students in our low-income neighborhoods, only 50% were graduating on time. Today, 70% are now graduating on time, and we have a ways to go to get to 90% and just a few more years to do it. So St. John has really embraced this strategy because we believe that ending generational poverty is going to give us huge social and economic gain. And when I say us, I mean our families, our businesses, our city, and our province. And it's gain that will be long-lasting. It's not just short-term gain, it's long-lasting gain. So this is really a picture of our network for our strategy, which I don't know if I mentioned is called Living St. John. And right now, over 100 organizations are leading pieces of this work. And the most senior leaders of each organization are participating at a leadership level. And so you can see at the top the business logos that are helping to lead this work. And the 3 o'clock on the dial there are our government organizations. We have all three levels of government, municipal, provincial, and federal. Senior bureaucrats and our political leaders are part of the leadership team. And at the 6 o'clock part of the dial are our low-income neighborhoods. And these are the resident leaders who have lived experience and are driving the resident engagement in the neighborhoods, who are at the leadership table. And of course, at the 9 o'clock dial is our nonprofit sector, well represented by our city's very best nonprofit leaders and philanthropic organizations. So we thought that Gary mentioned that Be Cathy began in 1997, so we thought we'd show you this timeline that collective impact doesn't just happen. It takes quite a lot of effort, and it did in St. John for sure. And the seed of this work actually began with the Be Cathy's formation in 1997. So at that time, our poverty rate was 27%, and right now it hovers around 20%. And we're hoping that Living St. John by 2020 will get us to 15%. And Be Cathy really introduced the first poverty study and strategy for St. John by the year 2000. And then we were so fortunate, we aligned with Vibrant Communities Canada, and we have benefited so much from networking with all our fellow Canadian cities. And we're particularly grateful for the original leadership of Tamarack, Caledon, and McConnell Foundation, who I know are all still involved in this work, because they embraced St. John and brought us into the fold. And in between that, St. John's progress over 10 or 12 years, our provincial government was paying attention, and they were quite inspired to through the work that was going on locally here in St. John and nationally with Vibrant Communities Canada, they introduced or they developed the New Brunswick Poverty Reduction Plan. And it was one of our business leaders who actually co-chaired the original New Brunswick Poverty Reduction Plan, and Be Cathy was very involved in its development. So really, it's been a work in progress over a very long period of time.
So let me just tell you a little bit about Be Cathy itself. As mentioned, it was founded in 1997 by Bill Gale. And Bill Gale was a business leader, a regional banking vice president, who literally was walking down the street, ran into somebody who was looking for some coins, talked to him, and as a result said, you know what, we as a collective community need to do something to address poverty here in St. John. We had the good fortune in the community that Bill, besides being compassionate, is also convincing. And he's the kind of person who, when he called you up and asked you to go to a meeting, as he had done in early December of 1997, most everybody said yes, and people attended. What that meeting did, one of the most important aspects of that meeting was that it put a face on poverty. So as I described it many times since, you know, one can't miss poverty if you live in St. John or work in St. John, but it's easy to drive by and not notice poverty. But you suddenly get the face of poverty when at that meeting a couple of people came and presented and talked about living in poverty, and it suddenly put a face on the issue, which is something that I think, which I'll mention later, is a very important aspect of developing the business community and participation in any collective impact work. So right now we have 22 business leaders who are sort of the leadership group in the business, Be Cathy. I'll mention in a second who some of those are. We have, in addition to that, hundreds of other people from the business community and the participating businesses, participating in various initiatives that have been supported by and promoted by, but not operated by Be Cathy. Because Be Cathy is not an operator of initiatives, it's more of a catalyst. It is not a fundraiser, and we've had discussions from the early stages as should we actually be trying to say, let's go get some money and give money to the causes. And the conclusion was that's not what is needed in this case. And what we would suggest to you later on is that not be your focus. It's easy, relatively easy, shouldn't say easy, to write a check. But what you really need to do is engage the business. And from that might and commonly will flow some funds to assist in the issue. In our case, as Monica has mentioned, Be Cathy was not about helping people who are in poverty per se. It's about getting people out of poverty. It's identifying what are the things that are wrong in our community or our system that is causing there to be intergenerational poverty. And that's why ultimately it's led us down the road to the best long-term investment is, in our view, education. This chart just gives you some of the people, some of the companies that are involved in our leadership. And the people, for example, for J.D. Irving Limited, it is Mr. J.K. Irving, who's the chairman of the company, who is a very well-known nationally and regionally business leader. And Moosehead Breweries, Derek Olin. These are people who have been active leaders. These are not people who have lent their name to the cause, but they've become active participants in the initiative that is Be Cathy. So there are a large number of participants who are supporters. And by the way, I should mention, Be Cathy many years ago decided it wanted to be financially self-supporting. So we don't seek government assistance to support ourselves. We want to be able to say the money should go to the causes, and we want to be able to say we can say what we want and not have to worry about having funding cut off. So that, I think, makes a difference as well. Monica, back to you.
So I mentioned a little earlier that education is one of the 4 pillars of the Living St. John strategy. And this originally actually was Be Cathy's strategy and has now been folded into the Living St. John strategy, the overall strategy to end generational poverty. And but Be Cathy to this day continues to put most of its energy into this pillar of the Living St. John strategy. And mostly because I think over the years of learning that Be Cathy really has come to the conclusion that education is the most powerful mechanism to end generational poverty. It's the fundamental piece that's going to get us there. It will probably take the longest to end generational poverty, but it will be the most complete and the most impactful over time. And over the years, as we build the various pieces of the education strategy, we can see in the eyes of the children and the families that each step of the way, things are changing for the children and for their families. We can see changes in their hopes, in their dreams and aspirations, and most importantly, their education achievements are much higher. Education is also, it's about your topic too, and education just happens to be a very attractive area for business. I think that everyone, whether you're a business or not, we all understand the value of education, and business particularly wants to help their community, but they want to also a ready workforce. We also want an excellent education system so that people want to help out, and because we know that if we can achieve high education outcomes, that builds strong cities, and that's good for everybody. So striving to improve our education outcomes in St. John means we really have to pay attention to the children who struggle, and in a large part through our research, it's children who live in poverty that are struggling. And what we have to do is enrich their educational experience from cradle to career. So we're introducing enriched education initiatives from early childhood right through to ensuring that our high school graduates access post-secondary education. And education offers so many ways that businesses and their employees can help out. So I'm not going to walk through this slide at all, but this is just to, you can look at it later if you like, but it's just to give you a flavor of the different initiatives over the years that have been formed to enrich the education for our low-income children, particularly those who live in the low-income neighborhoods. And we really focus on boosting up the early childhood educational experiences for families, a very strong focus on early literacy achievement. We want every child reading by the end of grade 2. All the enhanced educational experiences we can give children in school and out of school, 12 months of the year, and for extended days. And of course we have some special programs too that are helping our teenagers get through high school. So I just want to highlight one where the business community has made a large engagement. It's PALS, and more than 100 businesses today are PALS partners, partners assisting local schools. So it began back in 2000. It was a pilot project in one school. It was actually the brainchild of one of our Be Cathy leaders, Mr. Irving, J.K. Irving. He started by just meeting with the school district, and he said, outside of our head office is a school, and that school's in a low-income neighborhood, and is there something that our company can do to help? So through over a number of conversations, the school district and J.D. Irving, the company that he was with, they developed PALS. And what it is, particularly starting with this pilot project, is employees from Mr. Irving's company on paid company time. They become the school helpers. They're providing breakfast and lunch programs. They are tutors and mentors to the students, one-on-one and in small groups. They lead extracurricular activities. As the years went on, they began to see some of the capital needs the school had, which they fulfilled, new equipment and computer labs, those kinds of things. And the other thing that they've done is that they've actually paid each year for the cost of 3 additional teachers so that we can boost the expertise in early literacy and create some smaller classrooms. So just think there's 120 employees now each year offering 2 hours per week of their time during company time. So that's 240 hours of extra resources that school has each week, which is the equivalent of 6 full-time staff. So the PALS pilot, after 5 years, was then scaled up. Because there was a lot of confidence that it was working, measuring the academic scores of children and other things. And so other businesses and schools became part of the fold, and it's grown to more than 30 PALS schools, not just in St. John, but throughout New Brunswick. And the provincial government stepped in as well, seeing that it works, and in our low-income neighborhoods, the schools that serve our low-income neighborhoods, they've provided full-time community school coordinators who manage all the volunteers in the PALS programs, so the teachers can have time to teach. So the value to the students and schools and teachers has been astounding. Our students are doing much better academically, and their outlook on education and life is bright. They like coming to school. The teachers like to teach there now because of all the supports they're getting. And the volunteers, they tell us often how much they're learning about child poverty that they didn't really understand before they connected with children who lived that experience. And they're very invested now in helping these children succeed. And of course, the companies are very proud that they're helping the community in such an effective way.
Thank you, Monica. So that gives you just a little bit of a background of some of the things that Be Cathy is doing, what the business community and the collective community are doing with respect to poverty here in St. John. But the question would be what is it the business can do to add value to that collective community initiative? Why involve business, I guess, would be another way of phrasing it. Well, first of all, business people bring what I'll describe as a different set of talents and resources, and a different way of thinking often to the table. So those people who are involved in social services as such come with a great deal of knowledge and compassion and know about the system. The business people come to the table most commonly with little or no knowledge about that, but have some good critical thinking type of skills. They ask questions, and they insist upon sort of accountability, if you will, with respect to money that's being spent and initiatives that are being undertaken. The other is, if you connect part of the business community, the momentum will build to create more participation of the business community. I want to talk a little bit later about some part of that. Business people are also very comfortable with leadership roles. So most of them are comfortable in taking charge and doing what needs to get done to achieve the ultimate goal that each, whatever the group is undertaking. It also insists on business rigor, focus, and scrutiny. It forces people to stay sharp, and they ask tough questions. And there's no question about it. They do ask tough questions. Sometimes they don't like the answer. Sometimes they don't like the answer because it's the wrong answer. Sometimes it's the right answer and the business person doesn't get it. But that too is important to talk about in a second. They don't mind turning their minds to big issues, to big problems and big ideas and how to address the bigger issues. It's probably easier for them to do that than it is to deal with sort of what I'll call the grassroots level kinds of things about how to get things from A to B and how to make sure that there's food on the table every day. They're probably collectively better suited towards the bigger issues. They can be risk takers. So they aren't, where some might be a little shy about stepping out onto thin ice, business people sometimes are willing to take that and promote, sort of pushing the limit a little bit. They're very good at looking at policy issues, and for many of the kinds of initiatives that we're involved with and many collective impact models would be looking at, their business or government policy often are issues that impact on what it is that's being addressed. And so it's important that they be comfortable with looking at policy type issues and questioning their impact and what changes are needed. The one singular advantage I see of business that we have found is that after a while, those who are players in the game tend to be government on the poverty initiative, get accustomed to people knocking on their door, and they're often many of the same people, many of the same organizations that are coming that have good intentions, but government sort of has the risk of their eyes glazing over because they've heard the same thing from the same people over and over again. Business comes with a credibility to this extent. They are at the table, at our table, at least on the poverty initiative, and many of the other initiatives that came up earlier in terms of the collective impact kinds of things that are being looked at, as having no agenda whatsoever of self-interest. There's nothing in it for them at all. There may be some side benefits that come, but it's obvious that they are not there because they think it's the best thing for themselves or their businesses. They're there because they believe it's the best thing for their community. So that makes a big difference in terms of being able to get the ear of those that matter. As I mentioned, we as a community have decided, business community have decided, we wanted to be catalysts, not quote-unquote doers. This PALS program, for example, is not a Be Cathy program. It's a program that spun off as a result of Mr. Irving's interest in the issue and wanting to do something about it, but they run that initiative. We hear about it, we ask about it, we take an interest in it, but we are not involved in it. And that's the case in many things. We put people together, suggesting that maybe there can be some better collaboration on programs to achieve certain results with programs. So why do business why do people get in, become involved? Well, quite simply, it's the right thing to do. That is by far the biggest driver about why business gets involved in these initiatives. They recognize that it's an issue, and they know that as a community, it's the right thing to do. And that would be the same for many of the collective impact issues that your groups may be looking at or considering. So there are benefits, but I've never heard anybody at our business table talk about this is why it's important to do these things. It's important to do these things because it's the right thing to do. But it's not lost on and promoted as an investment by government, because there, for example, will be government savings. There'll be savings in fighting poverty, will save money on health costs, healthcare costs. There's evidence to support that. Costs for detaining people in jail, less people in jail, and other related costs with the justice system. Lower social assistance costs, for example. So there will be some financial rewards that will not really do a whole lot for them directly, but indirectly would help all of the collective community, including them. It will, as Monica said, often provide an improved workforce availability. That is not something that really is a big focus, but it is a big result, potential result. And it's really the improved workforce availability that will help, in fact, the collective community become a stronger community. And that's really the ultimate benefit that business, I think, sees as for its participation. Monica?
So it takes webinars like this to get us thinking about why our engagement has been successful over the years. Maybe we just take it for granted, or it's been a part of it. So Gary and I did talk, and we've talked to others within Be Cathy, just trying to say, what are the triggers that has kept business, particularly business leaders, engaged for so long? And we both landed on the very first reason was our founder, Bill Gell. He was so charismatic, and he's so well respected by so many other business leaders. He took a personal interest in this, and he just called his colleagues to action. And the cleverness with which he brought people to the table was pretty phenomenal. And if you ask any business leader, how did you become part of Be Cathy, they'll often say Bill Gell. So he's the spark. But then Gary has been co-chair with Bill for many years, and is presently the past chair for Be Cathy. Gary is, and so it takes wonderful people. In my experience, because I'm not a business leader myself, my world is more coming from the community, is that each one of these leaders care very much about their city and about their province. And when they're faced with a significant community problem, like Bill brought to their attention, they want to do something to fix it. And that's what's really kept them at the table, because this is a really tough problem. And business leaders like to solve big problems. And originally they thought it was going to be something that they could solve within a few years. And the more they learned about poverty, the more they realized it's going to take a generation or two to create the change we really want to see. And so they decided to stick with it. So your topic, your reason to have your collective impact is really, really important. If business can see that it is a significant community problem, a lot of business leaders will want to step up to help. I think another trigger was that oftentimes you think, well, let's involve business in my own organization as on a board or whatever, which happens all the time. But in collective impact, you know, we often talk about the different sectors that need to be at the table. And what has been part of the magic is business has formed its own organization. So it created its own strength through its own examination of poverty. The business leaders like to meet with business leaders and learn in the way that they're comfortable learning. And they've had a lot of space and time to figure out how together they can make a difference just by being their own organization. And I think the other triggers are once business takes time to understand the issue, you just have to be patient with them. Remember that they don't know a lot about poverty. This is not their expertise, not their milieu. So it does take a lot of time for them to get it, and you have to give them that space and time. And then they're more comfortable sitting at seats with government and with the nonprofit sector, because you're all experts and business isn't. And they need to build that before they can be at your table and feel that they can be useful.
So let me take a look at sort of the benefits of engaging the community and then keeping them, because getting them engaged is one thing, keeping them engaged is another. And it is a challenge, there's no question. And I'm sure you find that in all volunteer sectors that you're involved with. It's just difficulty to maintain momentum. So Bill Gale was sort of the founding father of our organization. And what was it about Bill? It was his passion for the issue and his commitment combined with his influence. And so really what you want to try to do in terms of engaging a collective business community on any subject, in my view, is you want to make sure you focus on ultimately getting the collective business community involved and not just sort of a few people who will help in the cause. The few people, and most of the organizations that I've been involved with, and most organizations in the community, have a business person or two who roll into the board, provide some assistance, and roll off the board. This is beyond that. This is the objective, is to engage the business community collectively in the cause, whatever the cause might be. So the most impactful way, in my view, to achieve that is to find somebody like a Bill Gale. Identify one or two or three people who you think may be able to, when nurtured, develop a passion for the cause that you're looking at. And the passion is essential. They need to be people who also have influence, that they will be people who are respected in the business community, who, when somebody looks at them and say, wow, if they're involved in this, there must be some substantive reason why I or the business collective community should be involved in this same issue. So you need to find that person, and then you need to take, I guess, a slow process of developing the passion in the person. Because I know when I first went to that meeting in 1997, poverty was not an issue of passion that I had. I had lots of passionate causes, but that was not one of them. It wasn't something that had crossed my mind. But through a process of engagement, education, and of course, most importantly, the whip that people like Monica provide, just making sure that we stay on task. One of the things that I would certainly strongly urge that is important for the purposes of keeping the momentum going once it's established is somebody like a Monica. Somebody who has a good blend of the expertise in the field, but a real comfort and sense about the business community, how to cajole them to the extent that they need to be cajoled, how to push when things seem to be slowing down to make sure things get done. Because it doesn't matter how senior the business people are, they're all busy, and it's easy sometimes to slip a little bit, and it's important that there be somebody like Monica, a staff person, whose time and talent gets dedicated in part to keeping the group's momentum going, to keeping them, getting the person or collective people engaged and educated on the subject. And then, and bear in mind that when you're starting to engage the person, a group of people, the subject matter you're probably talking about is not something that, A, they know a lot about, and it's not on top of mind for them. So just bear that in mind. That's why you need to be patient. Be sure to remind them you're not there for their money, that you're there for their cause. And as I mentioned before, money may follow, but make sure you understand it. Make sure that you get two types of people at the table, visionaries and doers. You may, a whole table full of visionary business people won't do it for you. You need people who will ensure that action is taken. So you need both those types of people involved. When you get your 2 or 3 leaders, hopefully engaged in it, you then have to count on pushing them to go out into their business contacts and engage others. And Monica also mentioned keeping together as a team is important. The business people, part of the success of Be Cathy is we work together as a collective team of business leaders, business and professional leaders in the community. We meet, we talk about these things, we're comfortable about it. We don't mind at this point asking questions, knowing some of them are pretty stupid sometimes, but we're comfortable with each other and able to do that. And I think that's important, that you try to keep that glue together, if you will. Keep them informed, but don't bury them with information. It's something we've always said to Monica. Monica, these emails are wonderful and there's a lot of resources out there, but at a certain point, people get so many bits of information that are useful, they stop reading. So you have to find that delicate balance. And as I mentioned, don't be fundraising, don't fundraise. So, because we're just about out of time, that's the end of it from our point of view. Now, questions, if any.
Thank you very much. So we have 2 questions. One of them is, first of all, they say you have a very audacious initiative in vision and scope, and they really thank you for the data. They're just wondering, did you have any challenges in formulating shared metrics with so many stakeholders involved?
Not really. What we tried to do is just pick something that could be measured, that we could all agree to, and where data could be made available, very high level. I mean, we can get very detailed in each evaluation, in the evaluation of each initiative, but in terms of our key targets, they're very simple. They're population health-like targets, and once you have your collective together and your leaders together, that stuff is easy to come together.
Okay, so the next question is, can you specifically describe how the businesses are involved? Do they contribute financially, programs? You did touch upon it, but just wondering if you can kind of do an overall, if you think about the businesses that are involved, how are they involved?
Oh, you name it, they're involved. So at a high level, it's a very leadership in terms of driving initiatives forward, and involved in working with government around public policy issues and funding issues. But right on the ground, you can see that there's business presents so many different employees who have so many different talents, and once you've got your business leaders engaged, they draw from their employees, and poof, you've got you know, somebody who's a computer expert, or poof, who's a communicator, or you know, it just goes on and on and on. An engineer, somebody, we had a design of our Teen Resource Center done originally by a company. So it just, whatever you need, those skills are there, and but it's a matter of business leaders knowing about them, and they'll once they're engaged, as Gary said, and become passionate, then they involve their employees in this work. It's their pleasure in terms of their contribution to community.
And that it can be small or large. Just to give you as an example of my firm, I'm involved and have been involved at sort of what I'll say the board of directors kind of level, if you will, so that been involved with the leadership team where we deal with the big picture issues, the policies, we educate ourselves about what kinds of things need to be done to address the issue of poverty, and learned about education. We learned about several things and then thought, here are the things we should try to influence. So that's at the highest of levels. But then, for example, in my firm, in our firm, we have said we want to participate to some extent in one of these schools. So we're one of the many businesses that participate in one of the schools of PALS programs, and ours is just twofold. One is at Christmas time principally, we have several families for whom we provide baskets of food and other Christmas gifts, and then during the year we will put on some sort of an initiative that has some focus, interesting focus of the law for the kids at certain grade levels, so that they can sort of get to see and learn a little bit about what the law is and have a sense of it, but in an entertaining way. Some people in our office are very good at that kind of thing, and the kids find it very engaging. We've also, at that same school, we're pen pals with kids in grade 2 or 3, and we just once a month write a letter to them, and they write a letter back. So it's sometimes very simple like that. Other times it's a much greater engagement level by the business.
I think business has collectively, they've put a lot of money towards research too. Like I was mentioning about the high school earlier on, about the high school completion rates in our low-income neighborhoods. Well, that's just something government didn't measure. So the business community actually paid for the consulting and expertise to continue to collect this data and report on it. So you know, they've got so many uses, you name it. You can bring in business expertise.
Well, that actually leads into our next question, which is about data-driven. So do businesses take part in the evaluation of the different programs?
Business leaders actually insist on evaluation, and have been known to fund getting evaluation done if an organization actually needs it, because business really cares about making sure whatever we put in place is the best practice, and that it can be scaled up. And so metrics is hugely important to business, and to participate they may insist on this, and then they'll help the organization figure out how to get the evaluation done.
In fairness, though, sometimes it is a gut feel, and we've come to grips with that, because generally we prefer metrics, but sometimes it is measured on the basis of, you know, it looks like it is making a difference, and how can we measure that? And we sort of try to come up with some way of addressing the measure of success, but we can't. So we just satisfy ourselves that it does appear to be making a big difference or a helpful difference, so we should continue supporting.
That's great. So I'm just in lieu of time. We have 3 questions. So would I be able to take those 3 questions and send them to you and Gary, you and Monica, and if you could just kind of give a brief answer to those. I can include the answer to the questions that we didn't get to in a post email.
Great. Monica would be happy to do that.
All right, so to just wrap up, I'd like to thank you again, Monica and Gary, for sharing your insights and perspectives on the involvement of business. There are some things that you really touched upon, which is the basics of collective impact. And two of them that really shone out on me was trust. Collective impact, you need to build trust. You need to build trust, like you said, you need to build friendship, or what did you say, friendship before funship?
Yes.
Yeah, so you need to build that trust, and it's not just going in guns a-blazing and saying we want this, this, and this. It's starting to have that coffee conversation, and you know, getting to know the business and figuring out and massaging how it is they can fit in, or how the collective impact work can fit in with the business, and then eventually vice versa. The other thing, too, was the continuous communication. So a successful collective impact initiative needs to focus on the continuous communication, communicating with the business sector, whether they're involved or not, communicating with the different organizations and the community members who are involved and who are not involved. Because those not involved people, if they're understanding and hear what's going on, eventually they will become involved. So those are kind of my two ahas that I took away from your presentation. So thank you very much. I will send you the questions, and there will be a post email. And before I let everyone go, I just wanted to say that we have two more Diving Deeper webinars coming up. So we have one coming December 13th about how to engage those with lived experience and your collective impact work. Celeste has done some amazing work in Hamilton, and she has agreed to come and talk about her experience. And then we have Measuring Impact for the early stage initiatives with Liz Weaver in the new year. So thank you very much. Everyone keep an eye out for a post email, and have a great afternoon.